Good evening. Welcome to the ELCA Churchwide Assembly listening event hearing on civic life and faith, the social statement. Our hearings this evening are non-legislative sessions for voting members to ask clarifying questions on certain topics before the assembly. And this particular listening event is different in that we are also wanting to hear from you about your hopes and expectations for this social statement. But before I get into introductions and a little bit more of an overview, I want to take a moment to begin with prayer. So if you would pray with me. Dear God, as we meet this evening to listen to ideas that we need to consider in the proposed social statement, please guide us to be aware of your presence in our deliberation. Bless us as we gather next week in Columbus for the ELCA Church Assembly to have your grace to be our guiding light. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I am Pastor Pamela Ho, and along with Lauren Solberg, we both serve as church council liaisons to the ELCA Task Force on Church, State, and Civic Participation. Pastor Tara Lynn, a fellow church council member, has graciously agreed to assist us tonight. Your comments from our listening session will be shared anonymously with the task force for their work on the development of the social statement. Due to Lauren's wife's health emergency, we found out about this evening, he cannot be with us. She is doing better, but had a scare late this afternoon. I am grateful to work with Pastor Lynn to carry this on with me. The resource staff who will be assisting is Reverend Dr. Roger Willer, the ELCA Director for Theological Ethics, one of the staff to the task force. Before we share a general background, there are a couple of housekeeping notes that I just want to make you aware of. When you hover near the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see 3 controls. Audio settings let you switch playback speakers on your device. Chat will be used to share information and links with attendees. There are actually 4 controls you'll be using today. There is a short question period, and you will use the Q&A button to ask your questions. Remember that only questions and comments from voting members will be received. The other control is the hand raising feature. This will be used when you have a comment that you want to share with the task force. Also, the hearing presentation, but not the open comment, will be recorded and preserved for viewing later on the ELCA Churchwide Assembly video webpage. And now I am pleased to invite Pastor Lynn to join me in sharing the presentation portion of tonight's session.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's Zoom listening event on the proposed social statement on civic life and faith. The 2019 Churchwide Assembly adopted a resolution directing the ELCA to prepare a social statement on civic life and faith. There are 3 kinds of church documents.
Your person come. Just one thing. No, people cannot come.
There are social statements, social messages, and social policy resolutions. Now we're going to share some examples of current social statements. There is calling for health, our shared endeavor, our calling in education, human sexuality, gift and trust, the church and criminal justice, hearing the cries, and most recently, faith, sexism, and justice, a call to action. To develop the proposed social statement, which will be presented and voted on during the 2025 Churchwide Assembly, a task force was appointed by the Church Council to study the issues and prepare the text during a 5-year process. Members of the task force are from all parts of the U.S., California, New York, Alabama, Wyoming, Minnesota, and other states. It is a diverse group representing various interests and competencies and brings to the task force various ideas to consider. We started the process by studying issues and writings, such as Martin Luther's views on the church's relationship and obligation to governments, understanding the history of the First Amendment, understanding political versus partisan. The task force will release a study curriculum this November and a draft statement in November of 2023. The task force receives feedback from across the church through listening events like this, through hearings on the draft, and it will bring to Church Council a proposed text, and a statement will be finalized by the 2025 Assembly. An important part of this project is to solicit input from members. We have been holding listening events to seek those ideas. Listening events gather members together and they ask 2 basic questions, and those are showing on the slide right now. And they are, what should be in the statement? And what should the statement accomplish? What should it be like? All comments are recorded without attribution, and task force members read the reports to look for patterns of members' concerns. We hold listening events and keep them safe by establishing commitments. We are doing exactly that tonight. And on your screen, you can see a slide with commitments for safe conversation. And those include to listen respectfully and speak honestly, to speak only for yourself and use I statements, to keep confidentiality, so what's said here stays here, keep an open mind and heart and listen. No one is expected to share anything that makes them uncomfortable. And this is not a space for debate, but for everyone to share their concerns and their questions. Statement. We will take a couple of minutes to answer questions about the social statement process. And I'm pleased to see that tonight we have 123 people who have joined us online. Please post your questions in the Zoom Q&A panel. These are questions about what you just heard. And after answering process questions, then we will move on to the listening portion of tonight's event. Thank you.
So I'm Roger Willard, the Director for Theological Ethics, and I see the first question from Elizabeth Beer, who notes correctly that a Spanish translation is created after the social statement is adopted, and that is correct. The point is that even at the Churchwide Assembly in 2025, words may be changed, sections may be dropped. And so it's not possible to begin the translation until we actually have the document in English. I will also answer the related question from Elizabeth, and that is this the first social statement translated into Spanish? No, all of our social statements have been translated into Spanish. Both the English and the Spanish version are available on the ELCA website, elca.org/social statements. And I will then finish up here again to Elizabeth and to others. Good questions. Engaging Spanish speakers in the listening sessions. We've have held a couple of Spanish-only listening sessions, and we've tried to work with the Latin or the Latine Community Association for that. I think there's also been a congregation or two, don't quote me on that one, but who has done that. Pamela, would you like to answer the question about the task force, who appoints the task force?
I'm sorry?
The question from Sharon Josephson about who appoints the task force?
I believe the it's approved by the council, the Churchwide Council.
That's correct.
So,
So there's a question about the how the social statement will compare to the new social message, which was adopted about a year ago on government and civic engagement. This is an interesting story in that at the last Churchwide Assembly, there was a memorial calling for a social statement, and the Assembly said we need something more quickly. We need something now because 2020 is going to be a very important time of election time, and so the Assembly said we'd like the church to do both, and that's what has happened. So the social message was done first. It addressed very specific kinds of things. In particular, it talks about the historic understanding that God works in two different ways in the church, through the gospel, and in the state through the law. And then it identifies 13 or 14 criteria for what it is that government should do, ways of assessing whether government's doing what it should be doing. And the point of government is that the neighbor should be helped. Is government doing that? How do we know? And then there's some portion on civic engagement. There were many aspects of government, the political life, our civic life, that were not addressed in the message. So, for instance, the whole matter of Christian nationalism or political parties, just to name a couple, or a more in-depth discussion of Reformation theology, these kinds of things, Bible and what government in the Bible, those kinds of things are not addressed in the social message because social messages are briefer and more focused, and the social statement is looking broad and deep at the same time. Yes, I'm going to ask Jody if you can answer about information available in regards to comments that have been made so far. I'm not sure I quite understand what's being asked here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is, sorry, I'm apologizing because I'm not sure if this is in relation to comments that have been received on the social statement draft.
Okay.
Or if it's other comments, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm carrying on all the answers here, but the questions are very much the kind of thing that I work with as the Director for Theological Ethics. Our Theological Ethics desk in the Churchwide office is concerned with our social teaching. And so the next question from Lawrence is, how will it be different from the first social statement on Church and Society Lutheran Perspective. There will be some overlap, but Church and Society Lutheran Perspective touches only very briefly on government, and it does it in a very it sets out some major theological, what should we call them, guidelines. So for instance, it points out that government is not the same as the church, and that God works in these two different ways with two different hands. This social statement will go, as I said, broad and deal with things that are not that are more contemporary, that are not mentioned in the Church and Society. The Church and Society, the first social statement, really kind of sets the framework for our church's social teaching, and each one of our social statements has contributed to that depth and breadth of social teaching, and we don't have anything that gathers up into one place what our church has to say about civic life. And so the new social statement will carry forward within the framework of Church and Society Lutheran Perspective, but will really establish the image that I like to use is that each one of our social statements is like adding a room to the Lutheran house of social teaching. And that first Church and Society established the room about how we look at social teaching. This will be the room that is about government and political life together and so forth. Pamela, I'm going to ask you to talk about the task force and how it handles the comments that come in from the listening events, which is from Penny.
Okay, you're asking me about the
Yeah,
comments.
how is the task force received those comments, and what kind of conversation has happened about them?
I think what we've tried to do, because we are such a diverse group in and of ourselves as a task force, we pay particular attention to the comments that are coming in, but we also try to listen to voices that maybe aren't as readily heard. And so every time we get together, we are talking about the comments. This is not a group of people who get together and we decide what is going to go in here, but we're trying to listen to what the church as a whole is saying and how we can come to a consensus on what we believe and how we go forward in expressing our faith in civic life. So we do really, really listen to what people are saying. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm going to, I see two more questions, and I'm going to answer the second one, which is about the timeline for development and where we are in that timeline. And then I will answer the one that asks about the town hall type meetings, because that's a natural transition for us into what is a kind of town hall tonight with you as voting members. So as far as where we are in the timeline, the task force met the first time in November of 2020, and we have met 8 times. 7 of them were Zoom meetings, so it's averaged about 3 meetings a year. The last meeting was in May of this year, and we were able to meet for the first time in person. During that time, we've had about 70 or 80 listening events, which are the kind of events that you might call a town hall meeting like we're having tonight. And there has been no document that produced by the task force yet, But in November of this year, we will produce a curriculum, a study curriculum that will invite members across the church to join in forums, adult forums, the youth groups, and so forth, to discuss the topics that the task force has been discussing. That will then be followed by a draft social statement that's roughly going to come out in November of 2023. There will be a public comment period for about 10 months, and then the task force will meet in late 2024 to finish up a proposed statement, which is then shared with the Church Council in February of 2025, and then is processed through the Conference of Bishops and goes then to the Churchwide Assembly in 2025. And with that, I think we are at a point where we should move into the listening session. And I will thank all of you for the questions that you've had. They've been very, I hope the answers have been helpful in getting a sense for you as voting members of where we are in the process and what's happening. And Pamela, I will turn it back to you.
All right then. Okay, and for those of you who are coming in late, I am Pastor Pamela Ho, and this is the part where we are seeking to hear about your thoughts and your ideas or your concerns with regard to the social statement. Just a couple of ground rules before I just want to go over before we continue. Because there's so many folks, we're asking that you keep your comments to 1.5 minutes, so everyone has a chance to speak at least once. And so you can only speak once until everyone who desires has had that chance to speak. Also, please stick to, as you speak, stick to I sentences and to the subject matter of what you would like the task force to hear, as opposed to speaking for other people. Do not use your comment time to respond to others in the room. The format is to listen to what others have to say, get it recorded for the task force, and then to move on. And as was stated earlier, please know that there will be no names attached. Each listening event record will be read by the members of the task force only. And as I said, in response, we discuss listening events at every meeting.